Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Hannah Lee, and I am from the Department of Culture. And welcome to tonight's Bermudian Heartbeat Lecture. This evening's lecture is titled Lost Links, Uncovering Bermuda's Native American Connections Through Archaeology. This talk offers a unique glimpse into Bermuda's early ties to Native American communities revealed through research. Before we get started, just a quick note, this evening is being recorded by CITV, as you see right behind you. Say hi to Robert. And this will be aired on television and will be shared on YouTube after the fact. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Xander Cook.
Hello.
Xander is a Bermudian who has been practicing archaeology in Bermuda since the age of 14, digging up ruins and artifacts and scuba diving on shipwrecks. Now, at the age of 26, Xander has traveled to many places in the world, including Germany and Egypt, to discover secrets and stories of those who lived in the past, bringing them back to the present for all to learn from. Xander first completed his bachelor's at Cardiff University in Wales, then his master's in the University of Southampton in England. Now he has returned to Cardiff to complete his PhD. His PhD concerns archaeological best practices in Bermuda. The objective of his thesis is to create a legislative structure for a functioning archaeology unit in Bermuda. This is in the hopes of regularly educating and engaging all generations through field schools, public archaeology events, and archaeological assessments, and talks such as the one he'll be giving today. Please join me in giving a hand to Xander Cook.
My name is Xander Cook. I'm a Bermudian-born maritime archaeologist working on my doctorate to develop archaeological best practice in Bermuda. My introduction into archaeology was from a talk at Tucker House in St. George's by Dr. Michael Jarvis of Rochester University back in 2014. His talk detailed the Smith Island Archaeology Project up until that point, and since then I've been involved with the project every year bar one. We Bermudians, as you well know, are not taught very much Bermudian history in schools as part of the curriculum, or anymore at least. So any information we gain is either through the goodwill of our teachers, our family, or through the multiple institutions around the island, including the one we currently sit in. It is my hope that this talk, along with what I dream to accomplish after my PhD, with a public-facing and community-engaging archaeology team, I will ignite the spark of at least one other individual out there, just as Dr. Jarvis did for me. Someone who wants to find the unknown, the answers to lost questions, and to tell as many people as they can about it. Something I can tell resides in us all. Here's me in my diving get-up for diving on a wreck. And then in the next photo is Dr. Michael Jarvis and I back in 2017 on the site. And then in the top corner there is me with my dad, who's come out with me almost every year to dig whenever he's not working. And then down there in the bottom corner is my co-supervisor, Ewan Shannon. Now, life in the first centuries of Bermuda was undoubtedly chaotic. Between hurricanes, the threat of the Spanish and the Portuguese, managing a colony in its infancy, and a struggling economy, it is a wonder that the written records of this period survive. Specifically, a surviving probate inventory written almost a century after Bermuda's colonial debut provided evidence for not only the lives of European settlers, but the enslaved persons forced to live among them. The presence of maps that recorded the building placements on Smith Island in St. George's Harbor in both 1616 and 1663 have also illuminated archaeological possibilities that otherwise would have remained hidden. These documents pointed the way for the discovery of a singular, primitive hillside carved oven, which has since provided the evidence needed to begin filling in the gaps of Native American life on early Bermuda. Now, terrestrial archaeology work in Bermuda is rare. What work has been done has been on primarily stone-cut buildings and the many forts that we have. Here you can see the 1993 series of excavations and research that took place with William and Mary, with Dr. Barca and Dr. Harris of the Maritime Museum. And here is one of their greatest achievements, at least in my opinion, is Fort Cunningham on Paget Island, where they excavated out the entirety of the moat. And this is Flo Liano. She is working with, and has worked with, the Corporation of Hamilton to excavate the Fort Hamilton grounds in order to better understand the lives of those that lived there at the time. Smith's Island Archaeology Project has since then created an environment that is engaging the island's population, with over 50 volunteers both in the field and in the labs in St. George's since 2010. Most of all, this project has spawned a new generation of young Bermudian archaeologists, such as myself, Olivia Adderley, and Sophia Banner, educating us on our history in a way that neither our schools nor the government have ever attempted before. This talk aims to create an understanding of the findings at Oven Site, Smith's Island, from the excavation records between 2010 to 2017 and 2023 and 24. I will present to you how, despite the absence of written records, the archaeological record can return voices to those that had them stolen or bound. Bermuda never had an Aboriginal population, but since the arrival of Europeans, their enslaved African, Caribbean, and Native American peoples, their descendants and their traditions have remained present, becoming, in some ways, indigenous. For this specific talk, we will be focusing on Native Americans. The first documented enslaved Native American with their African counterpart was one of two pearl divers who arrived on the Edwin from the West Indies in 1616. In the far corner there, you'll see the painting from the National Maritime Museum, or the National Museum Bermuda, showing the pearl divers. Smaller influxes of enslaved Native Americans in 1619 and 1622, along with the larger diaspora in 1637 from the Pequot War and in 1676 from King Philip, or Metacomet War, meant that at its height, Native American population totaled 20% of Bermuda's population. Unfortunately, between 1644 and 1716, the origins of the imported persons were not recorded, but is believed to be about 500 in number, creating a melting pot of Pequot, Wampanoag, and other eastern U.S. tribes and other Algonquin-speaking nations. Further disruptions to documentation in the 1700s from legislation that stated all non-white persons were to be labeled as Negro means that a modern confirmation of the true number of enslaved Native Americans in Bermuda at the time is impossible. This is proliferated and likely started by the 1687 report from Governor Hayden. This report stated that a total of 1,737 Negroes lived in Bermuda, nearly a third of the population of the island at that time, with no official delineation or mention of a different ethnic group or status. Copelson, who wrote Faithful Bodies, in which I found this information, dives further into the importation of enslaved individuals for religious reasons, discussing how they were brought in for the purposes of conversion to Christianity. Lefroy also details that any enslaved persons arriving in Bermuda must immediately betake himself to some handicraft trade. Full integration without equality or fairness was demanded. However, this erasing behavior and forced oppressed life did not prevent the enslaved peoples of each of these cultures stuck in Bermuda from continuing to practice the skills that made them feel at home. Bermuda is renowned for crawl ponds, fishing, whaling, wood carving, shipbuilding, farming, and piloting originates from these ancestral talents. Native Americans were initially brought to farm, but fought in preference through refusal to work to instead fish or pilot. These talents were passed down through generations of Bermudians, including the sequestered community of St. David's, which at its settlement was made entirely of white households, of enslaved peoples, and later Irish prisoners. These widely varied selection of Native American, Irish, African, Caribbean, and English genetics gave St. David's its status as a unique place, even within Bermuda. Various hair colors and textures, skin tones and accents meant that St. David's would be, and still is, one of Bermuda's quiet treasures. Forgotten to the point of negligence from the rest of the island for a long time, struggling with its separation of its white upper class west and its ethnic lower class east that resided on government land. This cruel knife was twisted further by the construction of the 1940s of the U.S. Army Air Force Base, disrupting the island and its people in ways that it still has yet to recover from. 300 years later, and it would seem, outsiders still managed to find a way to boot Native Americans out of their land and in a completely different place. Now, moving on to Smith's Island. The eastern side of the island is still owned by the Bermuda government and contained the first site attached to the Smith's Island Archaeology project. At the start of the project in 2010, this was theorized to be the main house, first seen on the previously mentioned maps by Richard Norwood. However, the structures are no longer visible by Google Maps or any aerial surveys of the islands dating from 1901 to 2012. Due to the absence of stone architectural material at the site, it immediately suggested that this was an early timber frame site. In order to gain perspective on the first century of settlement in Bermuda, the project has drawn upon modern tools such as ground-penetrating radar, 3D models, and an artifact and photo inventory spanning a decade of entries. Our first person of interest is Captain Boaz Sharp, a commander of Smith's Fort who died in 1706. A probate inventory from 1707, shown here, provided evidence for the captain owning a total of 9 enslaved Native Americans. The list of enslaved individuals were found to consist of 2 pairs of parents and 5 children, one of which was only 2 days old at the time. Due to the absence of standard kitchen utensils on this list, it was suggested that while this may have been the inventory for the main mansion, a detached kitchen may have been nearby. These discoveries were even more astounding when it was realized that Boaz would have been the only non-enslaved individual on Smith's Island at the time, at least while his sons were out at sea. The implications from this information are that the archaeological record of this site reflects Native American ways of life as much as European. As mentioned previously, the place of origin of enslaved persons was unfortunately not recorded between 1644 and 1716. But given the time period, those relocated to Smith's Island were most likely brought from South Carolina, which exported thousands of enslaved Native Americans, mostly to the Caribbean and in some cases Bermuda, in the 1680s to 90s. 6 years after the death of Sharp, 2 hurricanes ravaged Bermuda, one in 1712 that destroyed most timber frame buildings on the island at the time, and one in 1715, which destroyed the rest, including whatever remained of the Sharp family home. Across Bermuda, after the hurricanes, rebuilding out of our quarried native limestone became common practice. The site was not reoccupied, and thus the titular oven site represents a nicely sealed example of a domestic site for the colony's first century. As the excavations began in the summer of 2010, the first oven and the bedrock floor were uncovered, along with the establishing stratigraphy of the cellar-shaped site. So here we have what Dr. Jarvis found in his pedestrian survey in 2010. And so the thing to do in archaeology is to progress from the known to the unknown. So the first place they start is right next to the oven. And so here you can see all of the different layers, not many, but you can see the different layers of occupation at the site, down to the packed earth floor. Now, soil contexts in Bermuda can range, but the majority of the time, it's really only about half a foot. And then it does go down deeper to a meter, maybe even a little more, depending on how deep the bedrock is in that spot. Right above the hearth and the oven here is this aerial view of the flue, where the smoke would have come out of. And then to the far side is the bedrock floor, trowel for scale, which shows that there is in fact a post hole right in the corner. Now, for those that don't know, post holes are holes for wooden posts that were carved into Bermudian bedrock. And they are sometimes an absolute treasure trove for us archaeologists, because when the construction or the destruction happens, stuff gets lost in them and then they stay there. The 2012 season refined these types of layers, and a use of a longer trench to expose further portions of the occupation and destruction layers was used. A sparseness of datable artifacts in the occupation layers relating to the 1800s and the early 1900s, as well as an absence of mass-produced pottery, started to suggest that this was abandoned and sealed in the earliest years of the 1700s. However, the absence of pipe stems, presence of animal remains, and worked chert flakes started to paint an early picture of an outside slave kitchen or quarters. It started to create the narrative that these Native Americans brought the flint to Bermuda, or were found in the waters around the island, passing down their traditions and knowledge in an environment that preferred access to metal tools and had no access to flint. Additionally, a puzzling alcove, shown here, feature appeared in the north wall of the cellar, consisting of an adjoining cylindrical feature and two carved holes. If any wooden or metal pieces were in place during use, it would be now impossible to suggest where or how, as they no longer exist. There is, however, evidence of high temperature firing at the base that suggests it may have been a vent or a flue for some smaller cooking equipment. Another possibility is that it may have been a Native American shrine, or either indigenous or Catholic Christian significance, a place for objects of reverence, and a continuation of practices that otherwise would have slipped away for those so far away from home. Archaeology is about questioning it all. All of the theories are presented until new evidence is found to say otherwise. The final portion of the 2012 excavation work revealed that the bedrock floor was undulating in some areas, with multiple post hole features shown here in the different phases that represented two phases of occupation. A potential result of attempting to replicate early English construction, over-engineering, and renovation, with the larger post holes supporting the original structure. The interpretation of the floor surface indicates that it was uneven and highly trafficked. There was also evidence of pillaged materials post-1707 abandonment, but no 18th century material found in the oven or in the post holes to give a more accurate date. The 2013 season allowed for the full definition of the front of the structure as 24 foot wide. An additional 3 post holes were discovered along the trench, providing material evidence for the earliest phase of construction. These items were then potentially later buried and forgotten due to the aforementioned renovations. Most importantly, a further 21 flakes of chert were found discovered in the occupation layer, suggesting the creation of tools. Stone tools that may have been deposited in an area we have yet to excavate, along with many more discarded animal remains. So here you can see this summer student from that year posing in front of each of the different layers of occupation. So down here you have the floor, and then you have a rubble, either construction or destruction layer, a large period of no inhabitants, and then this is your quarrying layer from the 1800s. All of the rubble and waste limestone. And then after that period is another period of uninhabitants, and then some potential other works which may be linked to the 1970s hydroponics farm that was on Smith's Island. And then you have modern day. The new 3D photogrammetry model and 2014 season work allowed Dr. Jarvis and his team, including a 15-year-old me, to establish that the structure was actually of a rectangular shape, rather than that of the originally thought cruciform shape. as most mansions were at the time, and may have been unfortunately obliterated by the 19th century quarrying cutting into the southern portion of the site. Despite this disheartening news, a knife with a handle made of bone was discovered, as you see on the far right, sending my teenage self-interest in archaeology into the clouds. Artifacts discovered in this season support the theory of the first phase of construction and then occupation occurring around 1614, then undergoing deeply altering renovations in the 1630 or 40s due to the first first structures theorized burning down to make room for the titular oven. The 2015 season revealed the next major feature of the site via a test pit, the cistern. This is the test pit here, and that right there is the base of the bedrock layer of the cistern, and then here is the plaster wall. We just happened to come down on it. It's complete luck, which is most archaeology, actually. This revealed to us that we were not excavating the main house, but indeed the outdoor kitchen. Bermuda, of course, had no source of fresh water, and so this cistern would have functioned as these early inhabitants' source of clean water, collected from rain, a system that, of course, carries on to this day. The artifact count at this point also corroborated the theory of an outdoor kitchen, due to 48% of the artifact database consisting of charcoal and food items or waste, as well as only a 2% ceramic count suggesting metal or wooden dishes. To my point, an additional 30 imported chert and 6 dark gray European flint shards from toolmaking were recovered from a variety of contexts across this site that season. This somewhat confirmed at the time that not only was this a food prep area for the enslaved, but also their living quarters. After a brief year's break, the 2017 season allowed for the expansion of the trench to the north and to the west. An excavation of 30% of the cistern to produce a comprehensive story of its use life through the different layers, connecting the rest of the site's chronology and exploring the boundaries of the feature. Obstacles in some of the units appeared in the form of 1970s hydroponics machinery, supplies, and waste, but did not prevent the later discovery of an additional 10 post holes in the excavated area. The northern trench was then used to establish if the cistern was connected to the main house, which is that trench following to the right. We recovered over 1,000 artifacts from just this section of the cistern, with one specific piece of salt glazed stoneware dating to 1680 to 1710, found at the very bottom near some newly appearing whale bones. Since this was at the bottom, that means it was placed there first, and at the time of abandonment when the cistern was no longer needed. Further gray and chert flint flakes were also found within this fill, suggesting that while we do not know where the Boaz slaves were taken after his death, their presence never left. This critically assisted in corroborating of the date of abandonment to soon after the death of Boaz in 1706. The 2023 season capitalized on technology that had not been previously used on the site until March of 2022 in Bermuda as a whole, ground-penetrating radar. This detailed a linear track of anomalies seen along the bottom labeled in green. The 2024 season, not yet. The 2024 season, however, revealed that the larger western anomalies were actually just natural tree fossils, to all of our sadness. But the northern anomalies following the end of the 2017 Northern Trench are still promising. The 2024 season was also the season that the oven site supervisor title was passed on to me, coming full circle as the site I started on 10 years prior. I took over management of the site, focusing on the GPR anomalies and excavating a further 50% of the cistern. So in the next photo over, you have 3 of the team members from Rochester University digging down into the cistern. So it's quite deep. And behind them is the wall of fill, Now, there was about 6 or 7 different layers of use. And it's entirely possible that the upper layers were just filled in by quarry workers. But the very bottom had that piece of salt glazed stoneware that I just mentioned, and some whale vertebrae. So we do know that they were at least whaling closer to oven site at the time, and thought, no one's using this. Chuck that in there. Honestly, that's what we love. One of the best things that we can find is a midden, which is just a trash pit, basically, but it's the best thing for us. Last year's excavations revealed a slew of artifacts, including butchered whale bones, a boar tusk, some very primitive ceramics, and pieces of Bermudian daub, which have been found to have similar self-healing attributes to that of Roman concrete. Now, while they may not be directly related to the enslaved Native Americans, they are undoubtedly critical finds, pushing us further towards unraveling the mystery of Oven Site and hopefully the continued story of its enslaved members. Using the 2015 Western Trench to find the length of the feature, as well as this year's measurements, the cistern was projected to have held approximately 1,300 gallons of water and still remains largely intact with its water-impermeable plastering. As we continue our work in uncovering Bermuda's early history, it cannot be highlighted enough how impressive it is that the Native American culture not only persisted in these origin years, but as well as into modern day. St. David's remains a hub for Native American descendant community on the island, connecting with their heritage in incredible ways, such as the yearly or biannually Bermuda Powwow event, which I will be attending this year. Many members of the Native American community in Bermuda have also managed to delve into the oral histories and traditions that remain. These sources have been the epitome of my education on this topic and are something you all should read, such as The Community of Southside by Miss Elaine Fox, which just came out last week, and St. David's Island, Bermuda and Its People, History and Culture by Mr. St. Clair Brinky Tucker, both of which have summaries of every major event and player in the St. David's story. Furthermore, in the not-too-distant past, St. David's Islanders were derogatorily known as Mohawks, with other Bermudians being referred to by St. David's Islanders in return as town crawlers, and possibly worse. However, through ancestry, the Islanders have discovered that their true lineage is indeed of the Wampanoag, Pequot, and other Algonquin nations. And further research has shown that there was in fact no Mohawk presence at any point. Finally, while I am myself not of this lineage, it is without question that I will endeavor to continue to rediscover Bermuda's past as its new generation's archaeologist, with the help of my fellow Bermudians, in the hopes that I may be able to bring together all cultures that reside in Bermuda in a way that engages and educates every generation. I know I certainly wasn't taught about my island's history at school, and I think that should change. Regarding this talk, I'd like to thank the Department of Culture for this opportunity. I am deeply honored. I'd like to thank my parents, my grandparents, who are all sitting at the front, my partner, my family, and my friends for your anchoring support and your ever yap-filled ears. I'd also like to thank Carla, Michaela, and Keith at the Bermuda Archives, as well as Ronnie Chameau, Dominic Williams, Rick Sperling, and my mentor, Dr. Michael Jarvis, for their incredible help and guidance on this topic. I would also like to finish with the message that I myself has only just stepped into this topic and will not yet claim to be any form of expert on Native American culture. I am and always will remain a student, and hope that you as the Bermudian public will help educate me, provide constructive criticism, and support the continued learning we can all do from topics like these. If you see me, or my hat, please feel free to stop me. I love to talk. Thank you.